Good morning, venters. I hope you guys are having a happy start to your day. I just found out over the past 12 hours or so, or actually over the past 7 hours or so, that President Trump is officially the president of the U.S. again. If that was the side that you were rooting for, congratulations. If it's not, just remember that every time somebody loses when it comes to who they wanted to win presidency, we all have the same day the following day. We all put on our shoes and we all go to work, or in my case, on a walk. If you're one of these folks that is not happy with the election results, grab your shoes, put on your shoes. I've got some really good uplifting news that I think you're gonna love. Just remember, once again, whether it's your favorite football team, a presidential candidate, or a divorce or anything, there's always a million reasons to walk outside of losing weight. The great thing about walking is not only can it help you cope with disappointments in life, but if it's a healthy thing that we can do each day on top of those, on top of getting rid of those negative feelings we're having, then all the better, right? Check this out. When you think about famous people from Missouri, I don't know what names pop up. Not very many names pop up for me because I've lived in Arizona my whole life. But I believe Mark Twain was from Missouri. I'll probably check that and find out I was wrong. But I would imagine when it comes to naming schools or buildings at schools, I would imagine there's plenty of famous people that you could reach out to, right? And put their name on your school. There's also famous historical figures that you could reach out to and put their names on the school. I guess you're not reaching out to anybody when you do that, but I think whenever we see names on buildings, usually they are famous people. So what do you guys think of this story? Swedberg District 3 is an elementary school in Missouri. They recently renamed one of their buildings, and it might be the school building itself, the Claudene Wilson Learning Center. Guys, who the heck was Claudene Wilson? Well, I'm going to tell you who Claudene Wilson was, and as I'm telling you who she is, you might have fond memories of a person just like this at your school while you were growing up, and I urge you that if you do have memories of an individual like Claudene, I want you to definitely let us know down in the comments. Claudene Wilson was a janitor that began working for this school 30 years ago. But guys, believe me when I tell you, Claudene Wilson was so much more than a janitor to this school. She was a custodian. She was a plumber. She served as a bus driver. She did landscaping for the school. She worked as a cafeteria worker. She greeted students. And she even kind of served as a shoulder that students could cry to. And it's even said that when students felt sick or ill before visiting the school nurse, they would actually visit Claudene Wilson. She was kind of like a mom and a jack of all trades at the same time for everybody at that school over the past 3 or 4 decades. The school board voted unanimously, and they check this out. The school board voted unanimously to name this building after her, and she retired July 24th. To give you an idea of how important she is to this school system and what a hero she truly is, she retired July 24th, and a couple days later, she came back out of retirement and still works part-time as a school bus driver. Now let's all throw a smile on, no matter how bummed out you may or may not be, and let's ask ourselves real quick, how many people in our lives are kind of a Claudene for us? I remember growing up, we had a school janitor named Marty. I don't know whatever happened to Marty, but I just remember when I was little, he was already a middle-aged man, so I'm assuming that more than likely janitor Marty is not with us anymore. But here's the thing. I'd be willing to bet that a lot of you have no idea who the janitor was when you were in grade school. Or if you did remember, you probably have forgotten since your time out of grade school. Marty was one of these guys, from what I remember. Everybody in school knew his name. He was that jack of all trades that could kind of fix anything. And he was there to monitor the kids at the, when we were on recess from time to time. Just a really great guy. And from what I remember, by the time I met Marty, when I was in like first, second, or third grade, from what I know, he was already with the school for like a decade or more. And after I moved on from elementary, he, I believe, still worked there for a number of years. Now, I assume Marty eventually retired, and believe me when I tell you there's absolutely no buildings named after him. But I'd also be willing to bet that I'm one of many 40-something-year-old men or women that attended that grade school that still remember Marty the janitor. What makes this woman so incredible is that we live in a world where very few people stay at a job for more than a handful of years now. You guys know as well as I do, it takes a lot of dedication to stay at a job for 30 years, and if you look at her job functions, she probably didn't make all that much money. The thing she's got going for her now is that she gets her retirement check, and you know how retirement works. You're still allowed to work part-time for the first couple years, and then after X amount of years, you're actually allowed to work full-time and still keep your Social Security check. So Claudene, hats off to you. We are so proud of you and your accomplishments, and I just find that story to be absolutely inspiring. You know, there was probably people in her life that probably urged her to quit that job from time to time, probably urged her to put her resume in and find a job that was maybe a little bit higher paying or that had a little bit more responsibility. But you want to know something? They would be wrong. That job paid in hugs, smiles, right? Memories. And sometimes, God, I'm telling you, could you imagine being Claudene? I bet you every day she's smiling from ear to ear, thinking that building is named after me. Somebody out there does notice hard work. People do care. Small things that you do, like being there for children each and every day, it really does matter, you know? And I'm not Claudene by any means, but I want to be here every day for you guys. Somebody's going to stumble on my show, and they're going to be throwing their hands up in the air because they don't know what to do about their weight loss. They can't afford to take medications that are expensive, and maybe they don't have an insurance that'll cover these weight loss medications. So what do? Do they just throw their hands up in the air and wait for that day when they leave the earth? Or do you put your shoes on and walk with your buddy Jesse? Because when you walk with me, we don't walk alone. We walk with the Venters. One of our Claudenes is Mala. Mala, you are with us every single day. You are what makes Walk, Talk, Vent move. And I want you to know how much we appreciate you. And I hope that you stay with us for the rest of our lives. Sean, you are a Claudene. I don't mean that in a negative way, Sean. I mean from the standpoint of you came up with the saying, the walk must go on. You know, this is truly your channel too, Sean, and I want you to know that. Lily, you're our international venter. You're from Canada, and I know most Americans think, is that even considered international? It's our neighbor. It's practically an American. But we all know Canadians are a little bit better than us Americans on average, and we're so happy that you serve as a Claudene here, always with us. And there's so many others. Terry the Terrify, you are a Claudene to us. And I just think that that's wonderful. So if I had to give out awards, I would give out a Mala award, I would give out a Lily award, I would give out a Sean award, and I think in the future, we might just give out a Claudene award. So my first ever Claudene award winners are gonna go to those four. Terry the Terrify, Mala, Lily, and Sean. You guys really make walking not only bearable, but fun. I never thought in a million years that I would be touched by, a handful of random people. And believe me when I tell you, there's more, right? There's Sherry Ann, there's GL, there's Elaine. There's a lot of people that have really touched my life. And I would love to be a Claudene for you guys in the future, somebody that touches your lives for the better. Sean, you told us recently that you had went and got your lab work done at the doctor's and things were better than ever. Man, that is great news. That makes everything worthwhile. And I wish that we could get this Claudene person on the phone. Maybe, just maybe, we can try to reach out to her some way, shape, or form. I doubt we'll be able to, but who knows? Maybe I can find her on LinkedIn. All I know is when I hear stories like this, it gives me hope. If you listen to the bad stories, you'll know that there's always somebody out there doing something bad, right? Whether they're stealing, whether they're committing fraud on a giant global scale, maybe they've killed a couple people, maybe they've abused people. But we very rarely hear stories nowadays of heroes. And not everybody that's a firefighter or a cop or somebody that stops crime, they're not the only heroes out there. Sometimes it could be somebody as simple as the school janitor. Sometimes just by staying at a company forever, like she did with the school, it kind of shows a commitment. And let me ask you guys a question. If any one of those kids ends up getting married and decides to be committed to their partner, or if anybody decides to go into a career as a teacher, and just like Claudene, they decide that, hey, I'm going to park myself at this school forever, there's something beautiful about that. We're constantly told nowadays that companies have no loyalty to us, and maybe that's so. But it doesn't necessarily have to absolutely be like that, right? There are still some companies out there that are committed to people. And I'd be willing to bet that there's probably a handful of people like Claudene all around the country that have actually stayed at one particular job their whole lives. Maybe it's you. If you're one of these folks that through thick and thin, you have stayed right there with your company, and every year there's a chance they could get rid of you, but for some reason they don't, well, I think that loyalty to one another is it's off the charts incredible. I've met people that have been married for 50 or 60 years. I see them in the same light. We live in a time where it's just totally uncommon for people to stay married. We live in a time where it's just totally uncommon for people to stay at a job or career forever. But there used to be a time when those things weren't so uncommon. It used to be a time when people actually did get married for life, and there used to be a time when people actually did have a career rather than just a job. When you do gig work, and when you go from job to job to job, you never really establish relationships. Nobody's gonna remember that you worked with them for 30 years if over a 30-year period you have 30 or 40 different jobs, which, believe it or not, I look at resumes all day. It's amazing how much job hopping people do nowadays. And keep in mind, the resumes I'm looking at, guys, are teacher resumes. I think we would all agree that if there's any place or if there's any career out there where people shouldn't be job hopping, it's as a teacher. Now, there's a reason for some job hoppers. Sometimes they don't have permanent jobs with the district. Sometimes they're more of a contract worker. So it's not uncommon for them to finish their contract or assignment and then go to another assignment elsewhere. But I'd be willing to bet that a lot of them don't really enjoy that long term. Because when you are moving from place to place, you never really do establish anything. There's men and women like that too. We look at men and women and we get jealous if they date a million people. We think, oh my God, being single must be great, right? But then when you're single for a long time, you start to realize, oh my God, being married or having a partner must be absolutely wonderful. Now, in both cases, the grass looks greener, and don't be fooled. The best way to have a relationship that lasts forever is for it to happen naturally. And if you're ever at a job where you want it to be your career, but they're being horrible to you, well, sometimes we got to separate, right? So sometimes people want to be a Claudene, but it doesn't necessarily work out that way. But with that being said, I'd still like to applaud you, Claudene, because I think it's wonderful, number one, that they didn't wait till you passed away. And number two, I think it's awesome that right after you retired, you found a way to be right back at that school. Here's the bummer thing about it. Is she back at the school because she needs to supplement her income? Or is she back at the school because she truly loves her job? Now, I'm hoping it's because she truly loves her job, but I'd be willing to bet that a lifelong janitor or custodian probably doesn't have $1 million in the bank, but wouldn't it be kind of cool if she did? Wouldn't it be neat if old Claudene was a millionaire twice over and she still wanted to be with those kids every day? Now that would be something else, right? And Claudene, if you're listening and you can ever hear my voice, whether it be now or in the future, keep working, because something happens to people in this country when they retire. They tend to perish. I'm not trying to scare you by any means, but have you noticed that people that don't retire seem to live a long time? And when people do retire, you tend to hear about them 2 or 3 years later and find out they're no longer with us. Something tells the human body, I've got responsibilities, I gotta wake up, I gotta live. And when you no longer have those responsibilities, I think something within the body dies. Now, I could be wrong on that, and if you're retired and you don't do much during the day other than watch YouTube videos and go for walks, I want you to live a happy, long life, right? But the reality is, people that work, I think they live a little bit longer. I think the bad thing about work is we always equate it with something that sucks. But they say if you love your job, you never work another day in your life. And it sounds like old Claudene loved her job enough where she absolutely can't stand being away from it, even after retirement. So Claudene, I hope that unless it's due strictly to finances, I hope that you live to be 100, and I hope that you are able to help that school for at least another 10 or 15 years. Now that, guys, is a damn good story. So there's one thing that happened with the presidency that I'd like to talk about. And again, if you were voting for Kamala, I don't want you to see this as me rubbing it in your face, because I'm not. But all through my life, even when the Republican candidate won the presidency, usually there was a little asterisk that the candidate did not win the overall vote. But this was one of those times. Besides Reagan was a weird situation, because that was the very first presidential race that I can remember as a child. And I just remember that my family all voted for Mondale. And I remember Mondale was from Minnesota, and the only state that Mondale won that election year was Minnesota. And I came to find out that the reason he won Minnesota wasn't because he was from there and they decided to choose him over President Reagan. The main reason he won Minnesota was because President Reagan had an inkling that he was going to win big. And he didn't want to embarrass Mondale by actually going out and talking to people in Minnesota. So he chose to abstain from that state. And Minnesota ended up voting for Mondale. And I just thought it was a nice story, because Reagan could have won 50 states to nothing. But he chose to be a gentleman and let Mondale win Minnesota. Here's what confuses me about it, though. He won New York and California that year. He had to have. He won 49 states. What happened in the 80s that was so weird that all of a sudden Republican candidates, it became impossible for them to win? Because it seems like no matter who the Democrat candidate is, it could be a robot, literally. It seems like California and New York are just always going to vote for Democrats. So whenever you have a situation where no matter who you are, you win these two big states with all these electoral votes, it just seems like Republicans have an uphill battle. So all of a sudden you fast forward to this election, and from what I heard, the last I heard, because I went to bed around midnight, but the last I heard, I think Trump was up like 3 or 4 million votes in the popular vote. And again, I don't remember that ever happening outside of Reagan. It was always a situation where, okay, the Republican won, but they didn't win the popular vote, they won the Electoral College. What does it mean to me that Trump won the popular vote? To me, it means that all those things that I've been getting angry over, all the bad guys that get right back out, I'm sure some of them were released by Republican judges, right? I'm not naive to that fact. But it seems like overall, I think the people said, we're going to equate this crime to things that we're going to find the Democratic Party guilty of. And the only way you can see that is through that popular vote. So when the Republican goes from losing the popular vote like the last couple decades in a row to all of a sudden they win that popular vote, it's really kind of eye-opening. Are we going to live in a time in the near future here where pretty soon the Republicans start dominating the voting every year? Because if so, that would be super interesting. And me, myself, I don't think it would be that bad. One of the states that voted for Kamala Harris was Illinois. And that really, really shocks me, because when you look at all the crime that happens in Chicago and all the things that just make Chicago not so fun for people, it seems like it's kind of naturally tied to the Democrat Party, right? They have Mayor Brandon Johnson. Everybody can't stand the guy. Crime is rampant there. It seems like people are being shot constantly, right? And some way, somehow, just like New York and California, they just constantly vote the same exact way. They never want to change. They never want to try something new. And I don't know, call me crazy. I just feel like that is the wildest thing ever. So again, it sounds to me like there's going to be a handful of states like Illinois, New York, California, that are just going to always vote for one candidate, no matter who that candidate is. So again, I'm not gloating. I'm one of these guys that no matter who the president is, I'm still going to live my life and I'm still going to go to work. And look, there's more tire graveyard. What a weird thing. I wonder why those tires are being dumped off like that. Seems like it would be easier to put them on the back of a truck and take them out to a junkyard or to a tire, I don't know, do they have a such thing as a tire recycling place? It seems like there's a much better solution than dropping them into various alleys. If you guys don't mind, sometimes we need to hear the bad stories, right? Because otherwise it's real easy to tune them out and not realize how bad things are getting. But I think it's also important that at least occasionally we talk about the good stories. So if you really enjoyed this Claudene Wilson story, let me know. Because one of the places that I like to go to hear about these neat stories is a place called the Good News Network. And one thing that I've noticed is that if you want to be uplifted fast by going to the Good News Network and watching or reading their stories, you can't help but smile. Some of them are just incredibly fun-loving stories. The good news about those stories is that unlike the newspaper, the stories don't take 5 or 10 minutes to read. You usually can read them in about 30 to 45 seconds. So they're literally just quick little blurbs that kind of let you know about the positive happenings in the world. And when you hear those positive happenings, it does something to the brain. It lets the brain know that, Jesse, there are good people out there. There's a lot of good people. Most of us are probably decent, good people. And most of us do nice things by habit all the time. The only problem is all these cameras that we have are designed to catch the bad guy in the act. And the media, their job is to put something up that is so fantastical, whether it's good or bad, that it makes you want to stay there and watch the news. So they have to go literally out of pocket and find these stories that just irritate and enrage people. And the good stories, like this one with Claudene Wilson, they don't really make the newspaper. And if they did, people wouldn't read them because they're not really newsworthy to people. But I think they are. I think there's probably hundreds of Claudene Wilsons, and we're probably never going to ever hear about them. That's why I mentioned to you, if you guys remember the janitor from your school, shout him out. If you guys remember a teacher that maybe worked at the school that you went to for her whole career or his whole career, and maybe they really were a big part of a lot of kids' lives, shout them out. Let us know about them. I think that's one of the things I envision in the future. I envision a channel where we have hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people, where we're walking together every day, where we're trying to find a way to get along with our fellow human beings. And I want this channel to be a place where no matter what your religious beliefs are, no matter what your political beliefs are, where we can still get together and have a nice, charming little walk each and every day. And by the way, if you're here for the first time and you're interested in losing weight, that's the key. You gotta be willing to move and walk every single day. So if you're looking for that next plan where you can walk 2 days and then rest the rest of the week, this isn't the channel for you. We believe the best way to tackle problems, from your weight to emotional problems, is to put on your shoes and go for a walk. And I'm Jesse. I want to walk with you for the rest of your lives. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Shout out all those wonderful people from your past, and we'll see you tomorrow.